Hello students, and we are back with the fourth and hopefully final part of this chapter and this unit. Again, I am realizing the more and more I do this, I am totally not cut out for this YouTube thing. I have a terrible camera, I listened to my voice and edited so many videos, I'm sick of hearing myself talk, and you probably are too, but we're gonna get through this together. And I'm going to do like a quick little recap of the taxonomy dichotomous key chapter just so you can at least have the whole unit on video. That way you can review it. Tonight, Kimmy has decided to join us and grace us with her presence. You can thank her for eating my fiber optic cord and not letting me upload anything this weekend, which is why I'm in such a cram session to get everything done ASAP for next week before her next lovely little reign of terror. So, let's pick up where we left off last night. We are with conservation biology, and this one is going to be wildlife management. Now, some of you are probably hunters and active hunters. Some of you may not like the idea of hunting, but believe it or not, hunters are a really important and crucial part of keeping our ecosystems and environment healthy. The licenses that you have to pay for in order to hunt or fish, having bag limits, restricted areas, specific seasons for hunting, and not hunting out of season, aka poaching, it's all really important. The payments you make for your license, that goes to supporting national parks and the rangers that protect them. And the reason that hunters are a good thing is, yes, they may be killing organisms, but if they didn't keep their numbers down, they would breed and reproduce so rapidly that they would end up overpopulating. And that overpopulation would deplete resources, not just for a particular species, but all the species in that area. So hunters obeying and respecting their bag limits and doing their thing in the appropriate season is actually helpful and useful and beneficial to the environment. Poaching is where there is a big problem, and this is leading to some endangered and threatened species and even some extinct ones. That's not going to be the case so much with game around here, like deer and certain types of fish and turkeys, etc. I'm not a hunter, sorry if I'm messing this up and getting my seasons incorrect, but this is going to be with big game in Africa, things like rhinoceroses and elephants, those type of things that shouldn't be hunted because they're part of the Endangered Species Act, but people are still doing it just so they have a trophy to mount on their wall. That's where we're going to have a big issue with this. In order to protect organisms that could be threatened by poachers or any other type of environmental risk, we have captive populations, which are exactly what they sound like. They are populations of organisms that are going to be in captivity and protected by humans and cared for by humans. They've got two really big drawbacks though. Number one, it's going to be super, super expensive because, look at the organisms in the picture. Most normal people can't afford to have a pet giant panda or rhinoceros. Okay, they have a very specialized diet. Pandas will eat only bamboo. Rhinoceroses, you probably couldn't afford to keep grasses, etc., hay bales coming in to feed those things. And they need a lot of space. Again, you're not going to have a giant panda happily sitting in your living room munching on bamboo and just chilling and being happy. It's going to be a little on the destructive side. Same thing with the rhino. That's not something you can just shut in the basement or garage and say, bad rhino, and it sit there and think about what it's done. Okay, they're going to need large areas to roam. Same concept for elephants and cheetahs and other things that you see in a zoo. Hence the reason why zoos are so huge, because they're trying to make those enclosures resemble habitats. Nature preserves in Africa, which are basically big giant sections off pieces of wild land, are some of the better captive populations we have. but that's not always easy to come by. We only have so much space on this planet, and let's be honest, humans end up using a lot of it for other reasons besides nature's beauty and protecting animals. Also, big drawback is if the animals are endangered or threatened, being dependent and cared upon by humans, they can lose their natural instincts and fear of people. And losing the instincts of hunting and finding their own prey is going to be a huge issue. If you have a cheetah, because cheetahs are starting to hurt, their populations are going through what we call a bottleneck. And some of them are getting so insanely genetically similar, where even bringing cheetahs from zoos and trying to breed them with wild cheetahs or exchange cheetahs between zoos and kind of vary their gene pool a little bit because we're so worried about them. If a cheetah's been fed by humans and it's used to humans, it's not going to have the instincts of hunting and stalking prey and be as successful. The gazelles and other wildlife that they end up hunting, they've adapted to dealing with this predator. They're very quick, they've got great camouflage, and that's going to be an issue. More importantly, if they lose their fear of people, people are the number one reason that they're like going extinct, and their numbers are low enough to be threatened and endangered. If they lose their fear of people, they're thinking, oh boy, a human! They're going to love me and pet me and feed me and make my life much better, when really it's more like, hello, sitting duck. Like, no more. Okay, that's a bad thing when their populations are getting lower, to be like bouncing happily toward the thing that's going to take them out as a poacher. In the picture below with the rhinoceros, that is like no joke. There are some nature preserves that are straight up arming the people that protect it, and they're actually poaching the poachers. So if they catch somebody poaching one of their animals, they very much will shoot them. I watched a video not too terribly long ago that there's actually a lot of women in a particular tribe in Africa, and they're learning to protect elephants in a preserve, and they're proud of what they do. They said, absolutely, anyone goes to hurt one of my animals, I will put a bullet in them, no hesitation. So it's taken very seriously. And the giant blob of little cute baby pandas, that is through breeding efforts in zoos, trying to get their numbers up and possibly release them back in environments, or at least just keep these captive populations around so we have these organisms. Here we've got a couple examples of rhinoceros. There's the black rhinoceros at the top and the white rhino at the bottom. Between the years 1960 and 1995, the black rhinoceros' numbers dropped by 98%. That's insane. That may seem like a long period of time, but if you take in generations and reaching breeding age and all that stuff into consideration, to have a 98% drop in organisms with this COVID-19 virus. A lot of people have died from it, but nowhere near that percent. Even the Black Plague in Europe wiped out, it was either a third or 2/3 of Europe, an entire continent. But that didn't come close to touching 98% of mankind. That is a staggering, insanely big statistic of organisms to be affected. And they had less than 2,500 members of their species. Black rhino numbers have doubled from their historic low 20 years ago to today being around 5,000 and 5,400 members. So it's awesome that their population numbers have doubled, but at the same time, that is still insanely low compared to what it should be. And it's because people are poaching them for their horns. If you didn't know it, their horns are actually basically specialized hair. If you cut their horns off, you can see like the growth rings in a tree, and literally it is compacted hair. It's a type of keratin. That's what people are killing these animals for, is basically for a pointy clump of hair. When you think about it that way, that should really just like royally tick you off. Even some people that work on game preserves now, they're actually tranquilizing rhinoceros and elephants. And when I say tranquilize, they're like purposely putting them to sleep for a short period of time. And they'll go ahead and pre-cut their horns and the elephant's tusk off, or they'll dye them this like flaming hot fuchsia pink color. And it's to make it, well, obviously if there's no horn for people to cut off, there's no reason to kill it and attack the animal. Same thing with the elephants. Also, the reason they're dyeing it pink is because people aren't wanting a pink rhino horn, they're wanting the real thing. And elephant tusks are ivory, which was used for piano keys, among other things. It's now illegal to own and buy. It may not be illegal to own it, but I know it is for sure illegal to buy things that are made out of ivory because of these reasons, to make it less desirable. As for the white rhinos, they are in just 4 countries. At least 98.8% of them, which is almost all of them, are in just 4 countries on the entire continent of Africa. That is insane. We literally thought that they were extinct, and in 1895 we discovered a small population of less than 100 of them. So that's even smaller numbers to work with than the black rhinos that we just talked about. There's been over 100 years poured into protecting them and managing these populations, and again, crucially, managing their habitats. And now they're classified as near threatened, whereas 100 or fewer, that is critically endangered. So now they're near threatened, and we've gotten their numbers up from that measly around 100 to around 20,000. So they've rebounded even better than the black rhino. But again, we've had 100 years, a century, poured into trying to rehab these, and they do still exist in protected areas and private game reserves to help preserve and keep those populations that way. So this is evidence and proof that it does work when we have these captive populations and these conservation efforts. It's just not an overnight fix. We obviously didn't hunt them to extinction overnight, so we're definitely not going to make their populations rebound overnight either. On this slide, I've got another video that is kind of tough to watch. So again, if you're really tender-hearted or you really didn't like the last turtle video that was on there, this one's probably not going to make you too happy either. But we'll take a minute, we'll watch this, and we'll kind of discuss what's going on.
What a tragic scene of a poached mother and a little baby heifer calf trying desperately to suckle some milk. No response from her mother. I can't understand this. This is absolutely horrific to see how he's trying to suckle some milk.
In that video, it's hard to not get angry for me watching that, because that mother rhino died for completely and totally senseless reasons. Normally, as you saw in the video, the young are shot along with the mothers for completely senseless reasons just because they can. Or if that baby rhino hadn't been found by the people that made that documentary and taken in and been cared for, it would have starved to death and died. It wouldn't have left its mother's side. And to hear it cry and try to rouse its mom and not understand what's going on is just pitiful. And that's just not a one-off thing. It happens way too often, way too commonly with too many different species. This is why poaching is so wrong. Normally when we have hunting seasons here, it's so organisms are able to breed and reproduce and mothers can be with their young. But these people, they find, again, ivory, a specific clumped up bunch of hair, more precious than something's life, which I can't wrap my head around and understand. It just infuriates me to my very core. When we have these captive populations, ideally we don't want to keep them captive forever because, again, it's super expensive, it requires so much land, and we don't want them being dependent on us. These organisms are much happier in their natural habitat, in the wild, doing what they want to do when they want to do it, and we don't want them trusting humans too much, especially if, like the situation you just saw, could end up ending their lives. For reintroduction programs, that is exactly what it sounds like. We want to reintroduce organisms back into the area where they once lived. And they're only successful if we can get rid of the factors that cause these organisms to be endangered or threatened to begin with. Because, well, that should just make sense. Think about poaching or pollution, any of those terrible things that end up wrecking habitats and decreasing the success of organisms. If people are still making their environment toxic, why would we take all these resources, time, effort to raise these organisms and bolster up their numbers and release them back into a toxic environment? That makes absolutely no sense. Same thing with the poaching situation. If you don't make it illegal to hunt these organisms and you don't put laws down to protect them, you basically just restocked the pond. You pretty much said, oh look, I just made a lot more things for you to kill. So that's why, in order for them to be successful, not just functional, but successful, you have to take care of the factors that cause the organisms to be endangered or threatened in the first place. We also have these lovely little things called seed banks, and those are kind of exactly what they sound like. Instead of a bank where lots and lots of money is deposited, this is going to be where lots and lots of seeds are deposited, and they look very similar to the middle picture on the inside, and the one all the way on the left is actually real. In the Arctic, they are working on gathering seeds of every single plant on the face of the planet and storing them in this seed bank. And the whole point of this is these seeds, if, let's say, for whatever reason that plant went extinct, we can just go into the seed bank, pull the seeds out, plant it, no more extinct plant. We kind of have a backup plant here, and they can be reintroduced into their natural habitat. Hopefully after whatever factor that caused them to extinct was taken care of, just like we saw on the last slide. We also have relocation as an option for this conservation biology. Relocation is something that has to be done very delicately though. Remember when we talked about invasive species? With relocation, it's going to be when wild organisms are transferred to a new area, which is going to be really similar to or mimic their original habitat. In this instance, again, we're going to want to be super, super careful we don't create an invasive species here. Because remember, an invasive species is an organism that is introduced to an area that it was never ever supposed to be to begin with, and it has kind of created havoc with the native species there. So relocation is not something to do very often. We have done it here in the United States with the brown pelican. That was quite successful, but this is not something we do super, super frequently just because of fear of, again, interfering with natural habitat. And I always like to throw this last slide on here and talk about DDT because not everyone has heard about DDT. And yes, up in the upper left-hand corner, we have the slogan in 1947 of DDT is good for me. This is another pesticide that we here in the US used like crazy. And we used it on everything, literally. The picture at the bottom with the beach, that is a truck spraying DDT everywhere. On the people. Like, my dad told me this a few years ago, and I did not know this was a thing. And my dad was born in the mid to late 60s, so this probably happened in the 70s when he told me this story. But he said he could remember the DDT trucks driving through his neighborhood in Nyota when he was younger. And they were similar to the one that you're seeing in the picture. They would spray the DDT out, it would fog up all the streets, and he said the kids would run out of their homes and go play in it. A pesticide. Now the reason I'm telling you about this is just like with atrazine. We do things that are unnatural sometimes that help us and make our lives easier, but we don't always realize the immediate effect that it has on the environment. And DDT is now outlawed and illegal here in the United States. And that is because the picture in the bottom left-hand corner, the bird eggs. DDT is a pesticide, which means it's supposed to be on insects and it's supposed to kill the insects, which it did very well, which is why it was so widely used and successful. However, birds eat insects that came in contact with the DDT, and what would end up happening is the birds would eat these insects that had DDT on them, and the way DDT reacted inside of the birds is their eggshells wouldn't be hard like they were supposed to be. So when the mama bird would go to sit on her eggs, she essentially crushed them. So even though she was trying to take care of her babies and do what she was supposed to do, she ended up killing them. Now, this was especially harmful to the California condor. And if you don't know what a California condor is, Google it. They are huge, massive birds that when they're just like sitting down, probably would hit me like elbow height, something along that. They're, I believe, like a 6-foot wingspan, if I remember correctly. They're massive. They look like vultures that took steroids, pretty much. So if you've never seen one before, they're not the prettiest things in the world, but Google them and check them out. But the California condor suffered tremendously because of the use of DDT, almost to the point that they did go extinct. And we took serious, hardcore conservation efforts to take them into zoos, put them through breeding programs, and get their numbers up. And I believe they've recently come off the endangered species list, and this is, again, recently that it's happened, that their numbers are high enough that we were successful with it. If you Google California condors, you may even see some of these conservation efforts too. Some of the weirder but kind of cool at the same time ones is how we said with captive populations, we don't want them getting used to human contact. They would actually get like these like puppet things that look just like a California condor, and that would be how they would feed. I don't know why I'm making this hand motion at this point, but that would be how they fed the babies and took care of them. I don't know that I can say this enough. I have really missed you guys. This has been the weirdest thing in the world to just be sitting here teaching and talking to nobody and not hearing all of your crazy random off the wall questions. Today a bunch of us teachers got on this thing called Zoom. If you've got Miss Snyder and Miss Lingerfeld, they tried it with some of their kids today or yesterday and really enjoyed it. When I go talk to Mr. Matlock and Mr. Nichols tomorrow, I may run it by them because they both were on the Zoom thing with us today and see if they might want to try and do some sessions with you guys because we miss you. It's just straight up weird teaching without anybody to talk to or interact with, and we'd really like to hear some feedback from you guys and know that you're okay and you're doing well because, yes, we do worry about you still. Again, thanks for hanging in there. We appreciate you guys doing all the work that you are because we can see it reflected with the IXL stuff, looking at who's viewed Nearpod even. You poor souls that have been viewing my YouTube videos that I'll admit are terrible. Like, I am not good at this. I will own that. But I appreciate you sticking it out and putting up with all this mess. Hopefully we'll get to see you guys soon. If not, take care and have a good one.